Okay. All right, folks, pjnet.tv. It is 9:31 on the East Coast, and you are watching the PJNet Live bumper. But that won't last forever. We're recording, we're streaming to Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Our guest is standing by, our chat room is standing by. We will start a countdown to Studio 13 starting now. Well, good evening and welcome back to pjnet.tv. I'm your host, Coach Prasick, and I don't try to just unveil everything and reveal who is our guest, but you can kind of tell by what's behind me. It's Gail Kittleson. Now, normally, hey, if you have come here to see J.D. Winninger, J.D. had planned to be out of town and has arranged for Gail to come visit with us. And folks, if there's any wax in your ears, get it out, because the audio is not very loud. I've got it turned up as much as we can turn it up. But Gail, you are a expert on all things World War. Well, is it just World War II, or is it really just military?
Oh no, it's World War II.
World War II.
Yes.
Okay. So why do we limit it to that? Is there something special? I mean, I'm a junkie on World War II, as are you, I believe. And
right.
I can tell you why I think World War II is so big, such a big deal. But why do you think it's such a big deal?
I call it an addiction for me. And it's only been the last 10 years or so. For me, it has something to do with that it was my parents' era. And I think being a baby boomer, I never thought about how World War II had affected me. But once I started studying it and researching and writing about it, then I began to realize how much it had affected my childhood. And I don't think that's the reason I'm interested in it necessarily, but it's an aspect of my addiction.
Well, when you say it affected your childhood, how so?
Well, my father spent 4 years. He was in North Africa, and he was not an 18-year-old like many of the guys who went. He was about 25, and just starting out trying to buy his own farm. He lived at home with his parents and helped farm, but his dream was to have his own farm, and that wasn't easy in those days. They had lost a farm in the Depression and had gained it back through backbreaking work, and all of a sudden he had to leave. And he was the only son on a family farm, so there should have been a way out of that. I don't think he sought that, but I wonder if maybe he, regretted losing those 4 years. I don't know. Anyway, so I always think maybe that had something to do with the way he was and the way all of us were, and it's kind of comforting in a way, if that makes sense, kind of in a backhanded way, to think that maybe he resented having lost all that time. I don't know.
Well, I just checked in the chat room, and JD has echoed my sentiment exactly. World War II is the last time this country pulled together for a common cause.
Oh, absolutely.
And while there have been many achievements since then, and I would say putting a man on the moon would come close, but that was a relatively small group of people when you compare it to World War II. And when you think about the people like your father and my father that served in World War II, they had just come through an awful depression.
Right.
Although my father told me that he always had plenty to eat. I said, how so? He said, because whenever I would ask for seconds, my parents would say, no, you've had plenty. So he always had plenty to eat. But that generation had been pummeled losing the house, losing the farm, losing their
Right.
jobs, losing their savings, to go from losing like that to winning like that was a very emotional national experience. That
Right.
emotional roller coaster, and to me,
Mm-hmm.
it was the zenith of
Mm-hmm.
success in this country. It would have to be right there with the Revolutionary War.
Well, my characters, I always describe them as make do. I think I look back at the people of that generation, and I that's what I see. They whatever life handed them, they made do with it, and determined with great tenacity to overcome whatever obstacles there were. And as you said, they did that together, which is really it, when you consider the way we are now as a nation, it's hard to even imagine pulling together that strongly. But it happened. You're right, and it was amazing.
Well, in times of crisis, I think that those have a unifying effect, but it is short lived. Okay, in many cases, where
Yes.
this was a sustained effort. Now, Gail, I
Hmm.
am going through. There are so many books that you have written, and I don't want to just spend all night on this, but at the same time, could you? I'll kind of rewind here, and I don't know if you can see the titles or not.
Yes, I
But the
can.
first one that I see is Second Hand Sunsets.
Uh-huh.
Tell us about that briefly.
Okay. Well, that's actually the most recent one, and I wrote that about a place in Arizona where we go in the wintertime. It's in the mountains northeast of Phoenix, and you're underneath the Mogollon Rim, and so you don't see a sunset. You see what you see is a sunset on the eastern slope, um, reflected. It's a
Hmm.
pink, this
Mm-hmm.
glorious rose pink color. And the same is true with sunrise. You don't see a sunrise, but you see on the west, on the rim, you see the sun hitting the top of it. And then it goes down until it comes to where we are, and then we have sunshine, a sunny day.
Isn't that
So,
crazy?
it's turned around. And things that are turned around always attract me. I come at things from kind of a backhanded way, it seems like, compared to other people at times. And my mother used to say I dealt cards uh, the wrong way, left-handed, right-handed, and I'm right-handed. So anyway, um, and so that book is set way back in the 1800s, and it's about a woman who comes at life in a backhanded way. She has lots of grief, loses her whole family, and ends up going west with a guy who supposedly marries her, but it's the wrong choice, and it the theme of the book is that no matter how far down we get or how messed up things get, we are still loved. God is still there with us, and that's the big lesson she learns.
It's quite a love story. 1942, a World War II holiday scrapbook.
Yeah, that one I wrote with a woman named Cleo Lampos, and we wrote also the food that held the world together, and they came out simultaneously. And they're nonfiction, and they're just filled with stories, short stories of just incredible stuff that went on in World War II. The one that comes to my mind, and so this one is about how they celebrated the holidays, and
Mhm.
it was quite different. A lot of people set an extra place at the table for the soldier who was gone. Lots of things were really unique about the way they celebrated.
Yeah, and the
And
USO didn't exist back then.
uh, yeah, yeah, USO.
Yeah,
Yeah, yes, it did.
it did.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it definitely did, and they helped a lot with the holidays for the soldiers.
I'll
Um,
always remember Bob Hope.
yes, yeah, right.
he
Yeah,
w-
no, the
and Aunt Margaret and some others and some anyway.
yeah,
Well, I'm glad to know. Um,
yeah. I think
1942, the food that held the world, and that is the companion book, I think, to the one we mentioned earlier.
yes. And so food was a huge topic in World War II. We wouldn't think so necessarily, but it was because of rationing. So many things were rationed, like coffee, as you see on the cover, and sugar. And sugar was the one that affected my mother the most.
Hmm.
That was really tough on them. They were poor anyway, and then to not even be able to have any sugar was really rough. Anyway, um, so the story from that book that comes to my mind is really funny. It's about a Navy ship that was I think a destroyer that got too close to a Japanese torpedo boat, and they were going to get killed. And one of the sailors noticed um, that potatoes that were stored on the deck. And so they started throwing potatoes in order to give the captain enough time to get back the ship up and get out of danger. They started throwing potatoes at the Japanese sailors, and it made all the difference. And that ship was presented with a, I don't know, plaque by the Maine Potato Growers Association. So just
Torpedo.
stories like that. It's just really bizarre.
Well, when you talk about food and war, I think about what we now call an MRE, meal ready to eat.
Yeah, yeah,
But back then they were called C rations or something like
right.
that, K
Yeah,
rations, you name it.
yeah.
But I
Mm-hmm.
remember when the MRE standard came with one cigarette and one
Yeah.
little packet of chiclet gum
Uh-huh.
and a little tiny match book, a little book of
Yeah,
matches. And
yeah,
of course, those aren't included today, but they were standard
yeah,
issue of the older MREs. Now, here's
yeah.
one that looks a little different. Country music's hidden gem.
That is different. And it's so unique. It is so unique because Billy Ray Stewart, I met his wife somehow online. I forget how. I I'm not very good at promoting my books. I much rather would much rather just write. But so I know I need to do these things online. And one day there was this group I was supposed to go to, and I thought, ugh, I don't want to do this, but I did, and that's where I met her. I don't remember the name of the group, but and so we started chatting between ourselves, and it turned out that her husband is the son of the man who wrote the Tennessee Waltz, which my mother hummed it, sang it as we worked in the kitchen. It was a huge song in our culture, and so he wanted to write his father's story, and I said I would love to help you do that, and that was only last a year in like June or July, and he actually died a couple months ago. I found out that after we decided we were going to go ahead and do this, I said, well, I am going to have hip surgery. He said, well, let me tell you, I have stage 4 cancer and I'm in treatment. And so we worked hard last summer and fall, to get that book ready, and it released just after Christmas. And then he died a few months later. So that's a tribute to the man who wrote the Tennessee Waltz.
Okay, I show we've got 5 books left and about 6 minutes. So, in times
Okay,
like these,
this is the first one in a series called the Women of the Heartland series, because all my heroines are from the Midwest, which is where I'm from, and I know them the best, I guess. And this is a story of a young woman who married right out of high school. Her best friend married too, to an RAF pilot, and his plane was down somewhere in Europe, and so she ended up going to Europe, to England, to London, to try to find him. All she knew he was in a makeshift hospital somewhere in London. And Addie, the woman in back in Iowa, worked on the farm she lived on, and they would encourage each other through letter writing. So you see, there's a pen there and a letter, and it's kind of a lost art now, but back then, letters meant a lot. Letters, you ask any soldier, was probably the highlight of their day to get a letter. So that's that story, and that led to what I hope is comes next.
let's see.
On
I
there.
don't know in no particular order. Kiss Me
No,
Once Again.
okay, that's okay. This is a novella. It's not that means it's not as long as the other novels. This is about a woman named Glenora, and the name comes from my mom's best friend, who actually worked in her father's garage as a mechanic during the war, because her brothers were gone to the war and they needed help. And this is a story not of her, but I just used her name. So she she's a woman who doesn't have a whole lot of high hopes for romance. She kind of kisses it goodbye when her beloved dies on the Arizona in Pearl Harbor,
Mm.
and she just figures I'm gonna plug through life and do the best I can and not expect a whole lot of joy. And so you know how that can get turned around. So it's about second chances and about surprises that God might have for us down the road.
All right. How about Until Then? Is that the fault? Is that the one you wanted?
Nope, nope, that's
Which one
okay.
do you want? Um,
With each new dawn is the
okay.
second.
Well, let's just go to that one.
All right. With each new dawn is the second one in that series, and so we've got Kate and Addie. Kate in London, Addie in Iowa, and in this book, uh, Addie makes it to London to help Kate because Kate becomes pregnant. And I don't want to ruin it for anyone, so I'll just say that Kate has a couple of really enormous losses in her life. And as a result, she signs up to parachute behind enemy lines as a secret agent.
Hmm.
So that's it gets a little wilder
That
as far as locale and danger. And then the next one is A Purpose True. That's the third book in the series.
I
And
don't know that I have that one.
oh, well, maybe not. Anyway, that one is it culminates the story of Addie and Kate. And then Until Then is about it's the only book I've ever written, fiction, a book about a real person. This is a World War II nurse from Waterloo, Iowa. She served 5 years in 6 different theaters of the war. And just an incredible story of sacrifice and devotion and dedication. Very tenacious, strong, strong woman. She grew up down the street from the Sullivan brothers. Her brothers played with the Sullivan brothers when they were little kids, and that all four of her brothers. Well, she had more than that, but four of them also served. So uh, that I think that was pretty common to have the whole family go back in those days. One signs up, and the rest do too. Um, yeah, and
And the
all for the cause. That's about the battle for the Philippines and the Bataan Death March. And this is after that happens, after the American and Filipino forces are taken captive by the Japanese and marched up the mountain in horrendous conditions. Many of them die going up the mountain, and then they're in this camp. And as I read that story and did research, I thought, surely somebody had to escape. If there were 70,000 some guys taken captive and it was jungle terrain, surely some escaped. And long story short, I just kept searching and searching and searching, and finally, I found in one of my history books that that was true. Some officers did escape up to into the mountains to make life miserable for the Japanese for the rest of the war, and do their best to, eventually free those captives. And I have to say, my father-in-law was a World War II hero. He was an 18-year-old kid, sharpshooter, farm kid, and he helped lead out the Bataan Death March guys.
Good for him. Yeah,
So
people. That was a
pretty.
very cruel. First of all, it was a humiliating loss.
Oh, oh,
MacArthur was rushed out of town,
yep.
humiliated.
Hmm.
But at the end, and many of the people you said they died. Well, I would clarify that many were killed. If you stumbled and
Oh,
fell, the
absolutely.
Japanese considered that you were less than human,
Right.
and that they would just kill you.
Yeah, and many died during the years of captivity
Right.
too, or killed. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a very cruel. Uh, there were many war crimes committed
Oh, yeah,
along the way, and it
yeah.
is a tragic case of war gone bad. Anyway,
Mhm.
okay. Well, we're out
Yeah.
of time, Gail, but I wanted you to mention what you could about your books, but I also want to uh, go a little deeper because there is obviously you have a fascination. You've published many books.
Mhm.
You've got some more coming. You're going at it, but what keeps you going? Not many people have written this many books. What
Oh,
keeps you going?
Well, what motivated me in the first place was I always knew I was supposed to write, and I didn't really start in earnest until I was in my mid 50s, because I didn't have, you have to, besides having the skills, you have got to have confidence.
Mhm.
And I did not have that, and it took decades to develop it. So that's why I started so late. And as I became more secure in God's love and in just my concept of myself and what I could offer the world, I used to think had nothing to offer. So anything is an improvement on that. And so as that developed, I garnered the courage to plunge into it and put myself out there.
Well, Gail,
And I
you have
love it.
written many, and I hope that your work not only inspires readers, but it inspires others who might be struggling as you were, thinking that you did not have much to offer. We all have something to offer. And Gail,
Absolutely.
you have offered so much. Thank you for sharing
Thank
tonight.
you.
We appreciate, and I know JD appreciates you filling in. He got the night
Yeah.
off tonight.
Hello, JD, if you're watching.
He is, I promise you. Okay. All right. Well, folks, there you have the view of the Eagle's Nest, the broadcast facilities here at pjnet.tv. And that's going to pretty much wind it up for me this week. Not for PJNet, because tomorrow night is Steve Hazard's. He'll start the music about 9 p.m. Eastern, and we have a lot of fun there. But 10 o'clock, mark it on your calendar. Be here. Be there or be square. My perspective and comment will take the past week in current events and news, and he will bring it to you from a Christian biblical perspective. You'll like it. And I appreciate him giving me the night off on Friday. I really do. Folks, we appreciate so much each one of you that take part in PJNet. And taking part might be the chat room. Taking part might be just viewing the program. Taking part might be just being the producer. That would be Barbara. Taking part might just be praying for the mission of PJNet, which is to provide a platform for everyday Christians to share their walk with Christ. So, as I leave you with a challenge in the form of 2 questions. Here's the first one. What is the boldest thing that you have ever done for Jesus Christ? And the second question, when was that? I hope that none of us will be satisfied with either answer.